I pray for the future of Jewish prayer. You see, we've done an excellent job teaching our children, teaching our students how to pray. We've taught them fluency, we've taught them Hebrew literacy, we've taught them how to navigate the siddur. But I worry that this is not enough. My wife is a second grade teacher. A few years ago, she had a sixth grader come back to her classroom and say, "Mora Eva, you know what I miss about second grade? I miss singing the prayer. We used to sing the prayer, and now we say it." And we do such a good job teaching our children how to say prayer. We teach them how to say prayer in sixth grade so they can say prayer in ninth grade, so they can say prayer in 12th grade, so they can say prayer in their shuls, in their temples, in their homes. But is it enough? Chana Tenenbaum found in a recent survey of post-yeshiva high school students that only 16% of these students found tefillah, found Jewish prayer to be spiritually meaningful, whereas comparatively speaking, 20% of the same population found athletics to be spiritually meaningful, as I'm sure we all do. How is it possible that the avodah shebalev, the work of our hearts, the work of our souls, is not spiritually fulfilling, is not sustaining our children beyond the walls of our institutions? What I'd like to share with you tonight is a discovery that I had when I was in high school, and the way in which that discovery has translated into a method of teaching. When I was in high school, I dreaded tefillah as much as I continued praying. I was a good kid. I prayed 3 times a day. I went to a traditional yeshiva high school, but I was bored. I was bored by the routine. I didn't find it spiritually fulfilling. But I was curious, and I looked around, and I noticed that there was a subset of students who were animated by tefillah, who had a sustained spiritual practice through Jewish prayer. I noticed that these students were actually using a different book. They were using a different siddur. Unlike the siddur that I was using, one that was paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, these students were using a poetic siddur, one that was built around line breaks, verse after verse after verse. An epic poem. I found this curious, I found this a little strange, but I was willing to experiment really with anything, and so I tried this. I found it incredibly annoying at first, irritating. It slowed me down, but as I persisted, as I continued, I was able somehow to catch my breath at the end of each line. I noticed that as I continued to pray with this siddur, my praying became lighter. It became easier. I was able to make meaning in focused ways, not in generalized ways. My mood wasn't inspired. I was inspired by the text of the siddur. As a high school student, I didn't know it at the time, but I had discovered the poetry in prayer by reading my prayers as poetry. As a high school teacher now of English, of tefillah, I now know that I had somehow gotten past the great obstacle, the stumbling block of keva, of fixed prayer, that the rabbis write about. James Logaback says that the art of the poetic line is the primary expression, the primary form of poetry. And I had somehow uncovered the art of the poetic line in my siddur. And here I was channeling what the rabbis talk about in the Talmud. The greatest obstacle of fixed prayer, of keva, is that ein yachol lechadesh badavar, that one is not able to make it new again. And as Ezra Pound says, you need to make it new again. You need to put it in new context so that you can experience it differently. What I want to share with you now is my method of teaching my students how to replicate this discovery. It's a 4-step method, and I hope you'll follow with me as I go through it. Step 1, listen. I want you to listen closely, not to the noises around you, not to the text of the siddur. I want you to listen, because the Mishnah in Brachot says that the original pietists, the Chasidim Harishonim, Hayushoim Sha'achat, they would wait for one moment before prayer, perhaps an hour, perhaps a moment. They would listen. What were they listening to? Rav Kook says, at the beginning of his commentary on the siddur, the constant activity of the soul is prayer. And so, what are we listening to when we listen? We listen to the constant activity of our souls. Are we feeling angry? Are we feeling fearful? Are we feeling grateful? Are we feeling joy? What are we feeling right now? Because that matters. We need to take that and channel that into our prayer work, into our kavanah work, as we build our own siddurim together. So in the work of building a siddur, I tell my students, first listen, and then literally take the text of the siddur, copy and paste it, but here, translate it in your own words. Put your own language on the page. You can translate an English translation if you like. But one of the revelations that I had in using that siddur is that translation work, the kind of work that we almost expect of our students, doesn't happen automatically. In fact, if every time I told a student to have kavanah, I probably meant something before like this. Take this ancient text, imagine it in your own words, put it in a language that makes sense to you at this moment, and do all that work in your mind, and do it 3 times a day. That's crazy, I think. We have to make that work explicit for our students. So if in step number 2 we tell our students to translate the tefillah, we're actually telling them to do this work on the page. Translate the tefillah in a developmentally appropriate way in your own words, in your own language. It's step number 2. Step number 3, break those lines. If a discovery that I had is that not only syntax mattered, not only sense mattered, but speed mattered too in my reading of the siddur as an epic poem, well, break those lines. Baruch, Atah, Hashem. How does that feel different? Hashem svatai tiftach. Hashem svatai tiftach. How does that feel different? Here we're going for feeling, we're going for pacing. Create that siddur by breaking those lines. So we've listened, we've translated, we've broken lines, and step number 4 is the process step. Try it out. Take the siddur for a spin. Take it for a trip. See how it feels. Be open to revise it. Be open to change it. Notice what's relevant, and notice also what's irrelevant. What needs to be cut, what needs to be revised. Because at every moment, if you're my high school students here, at every moment you're changing. At every moment you're a different person. You're not going to be the same person tomorrow. You won't be the same person next week, next month, next year. Revise the siddur. It's always unfinished. These are the 4 steps. I've been able to do this in pockets with a group of poets as their coach on a slam poetry team. We've taken biblical texts. We've taken texts from the siddur. We've broken those lines. We've put them into verse. We've made them our own in our own words. But this is not for the margins, and this is not just for the poets. This is the work that needs to happen in all of our schools, in all of our shuls, in all of our homes, because if it doesn't, I worry that the siddur will grow more and more distant, more and more foreign, more and more of a ritual object. I don't think that this method is yesh me'ayin. I don't think that this is something from nothing. I think that this is a recovery of something really, really ancient. We know, those who read the Torah, we know that Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, at the Song of the Sea, builds a tefillah, not just in heightened language, but in heightened form. Look at those phrase breaks. Look at those line breaks. Notice how that shapes your reading experience. This happens at Shirat Hayam. It also happens at the end of Moshe's life. At the end of Devarim, Parshat Ha'azinu, we have 2 columns astride. Again, form informing reading experience. Form matters. We know that Shirat Hayam, the Song of the Sea, is actually part of our tefillah. It's part of the Pesukei de Zimra. But the secret here is that the Shirah is really a poem. And it's the poem of the entire Torah. Moshe says at the end of his life, teaching us this, V'ata kitvu lachem et hashirah azot sima b'fihem. Now take this poem, take this song, and put it in your mouth. Place it in your mouth. And this is our prayer. This is our prayer, that our children should take their siddur and place it in their mouth. David HaMelech, King David, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, they responded to Moshe. They built heightened language, poetry, with repetition and cadences, acrostics, parallelism. All that is there in Tehillim, in the Shirim. The Mizmorim, the Zmirot, the Slichot of the Paitanim, of the medieval poets, they build on Moshe's work. They contribute to the great anthology of our siddur, which is an anthology of verse. So this could be a gift to our children. My hope, and really my hope for all of us here, is that even if we're not educators, we take a work of kavanah building into our own lives, not just as an abstract sense that we will have more focus while we daven, but actually take a method of translation work, take a method of rethinking the siddur as a poem, as verse, and take it into our own lives. How might that sustain us? How might that mirror our greatest hopes and greatest frustrations? My greatest prayer and my wish for my students is that they should run to pray. They shouldn't dread tefillah. They should run in the morning, in the evening, and the afternoon. They should see in the siddur, they should see in the prayer book their greatest hopes, their greatest dreams, and yes, their greatest frustrations. They should see in the siddur a companion, a best friend, a guide, something to take with them for the rest of their lives, something to sustain their spiritual path and their spiritual fulfillment. For if not in the siddur, if not in the most sacred, most visited text in our tradition, where else and how else will they do this? I hope that they can do this by recovering the poetry in prayer. Thank you.